So here are 9 oddly specific family issues that are rarely talked about. These are damaging FYI, so just prepare yourself a little bit as we talk about them. After the response to a video that I did called 11 Oddly Specific Childhood Trauma Issues, which is at about 5.5 million views now, something that I'm greatly humbled by, I realized that there should be a follow-up video but on the systemic family dynamics that cause the 11 specific childhood trauma issues, things like refrigerator buzz depression, crying valve, and things like emotional delay that I talked about in that video. That first video looked at the what, the symptoms, but this video is going to be looking at the why, the systemic blueprint stuff from the way that we were raised that kind of keeps us stuck in our present. If you grew up in dysfunction, many of these will resonate strongly with you. And you might find some answers to some issues that you're struggling with that carry over from your family life into your present life. So I'm going to describe the issue, about how it impacts or creates damage, and then I'm also going to talk about what to do about it. So here goes. So up first is what I call not mutually satisfying. This one is really about the relationship our parents had with each other and the quality of that relationship not being mutually satisfying. What this looks like is growing up with parents who barely tolerated each other, or that they existed in codependency or an ongoing power struggle, such as controlling each other, or they were simple like adversaries of each other or had a sad, lifeless marriage. Mutually satisfying was a term that I read that blew my mind in a book called Group Psychotherapy by Irvin Yalom. Check him out if you don't know that name. He was talking about how people can live in such a stuck and non-reciprocal partnership. Or they can be children growing up in homes with parents who had relationships like that. And in context of Yalom's work, group therapy is where people can learn to have or learn the skills to have mutually satisfying relationships, but through healthy conflict. Imagine if your family growing up, if your parents enjoyed each other, or there was a real partnership there, or they enjoyed their marriage. That term, as simple as it is, really blew my mind because it kind of says it all. And here is how not mutually satisfying impacts children. Because it becomes a blueprint for relationships, whether we like it or not, you might find yourself in non-reciprocal relationships where you do everything or you kind of live in a loneliness. Or maybe you don't believe that mutually satisfying really exists when it actually does. For some, the impact was so bad that we avoid intimacy and we avoid relationships for not wanting that level of misery again like we experienced earlier or what we saw. You might feel guilty for wanting more, especially when your parents told you, don't ask for much, or that's what they modeled. Here's what to do about it. 2 things. Truly understand the nature of your parental relationships to each other. What was the dysfunctional stuff about, or what was the abusive nature about? What made them stay? What made them double down on things in that non-mutually satisfying relationships? And the second piece to this is to truly understand how you feel about mutually satisfying. Deep down, like, do you have a subconscious idea that you need someone to tolerate you instead of enjoy you, or vice versa? And lastly, what might be an alternative to this? Mutually satisfying relationships. They're essential for our emotional well-being, our personal growth, emphasizing authenticity, vulnerability, and genuine human connection. Moving on to number 2, which is what I call elephants are only for bitching about. This one isn't just about elephants in the room, which means to ignore a massive problem in the family. It's about how families can complain without doing anything about the elephant in the room. This is highly specific. It's kind of like a sneaky family issue where a parent complains about the other, but doesn't change anything relevant to the one I just talked about. Another example is family connects through sarcasm and victimization, but they don't change anything. And lastly, no one sets a limit or sets healthy boundaries, which say like a ragey grandparent, but they will complain forever at every holiday that they experience, that ragey grandparent. And also that parents don't protect their kids from their own parents. A parent has a special relationship with you at the expense of someone else, bitching about someone else to gain connection with you is another example of this. In short, when we really look at it, it seems that having the thing to bitch about is more valuable than healthy change. It's kind of dark when you really kind of think about it, but a lot of us grow up in that kind of stuff. Here's how it impacts us. In short, this might be the key piece to the whole video, and something I'll talk about next is the impact is that we lose faith in people doing the right thing or taking care of problems to protect kids and other family members, even themselves. You might have a lot of disgust or rage about people not taking care of things. Check in with yourself and see if that's a trigger for you. Here's what to do with this one. Really reclaim the reality around why problems weren't addressed. Because maybe complaining was the only thing that was valued or the only perceived recourse. It's also watch out for being triggered, you personally, about people's avoidance or maybe their victimization, or really watch out for your own avoidance, which might have been learned from your family system growing up. Here is what this isn't. Here is the healthy alternative to number 2. It means to address issues directly through effective action, using healthy resources. Going to therapy, going to marriage counseling, figuring something out, having hard conversations, that's what all that means. And if you don't know me, I'm Patrick Teahan, MSW, and this channel is all about childhood trauma, specifically from family of origin as a system, as well as discovering ways to recover for our better mental health. And if you want more regular helpful info on childhood trauma, you can subscribe to the channel and check out my email subscription list for more resources and live events. Moving on to number 3, and related to the last one, is that reality is too relative, or reality is what I say it is. Why 2 and 3 are so crucial is one of the biggest pieces growing up in abuse or dysfunction is the damage to one's perception as a child. Here is what reality is what I say it is might look like in a family growing up. It's everything from like, I'm not mad, when they're clearly mad, to a parent saying you're the most difficult child on the planet, which is a version of scapegoating. Scapegoating, as I like to define it, is singling out a child as a distraction from parental issues or parental failings. And in this issue, parents have a lot of power over reality. So no, cleaning up the entire house isn't good enough, and the parent comes in and says, you missed a spot and you're like 5 years old. Or when they left you with a relative for like 2 years, and when you talk about it, to them it's like, it's no big deal. That shouldn't have had any issue about anything. The impact is damage to our perception, which really looks like a lot of self-doubt. It looks like the struggle to have a defined sense of self, like we don't trust our reality, or we don't trust ourselves to call it like it is. And we tend to need a lot of help with that until it takes within us, until we can learn to do that and learn that we can trust what we see and make decisions about what we see. And think about your dating life with all that. So while not everything contrary to our perception is gaslighting, but in the case of the abusive family, there is usually a strong motive to gaslight children through like an emotionally immature parent's worldview. So here's what to do about it. A lot of work needs to happen at really examining the family and the parents' issues and their motives. Why would a parent say leaving you with a relative for 2 years is no big deal, when that was a big piece of damage to your attachment? What motivates them about what they say about what reality is? How does like their version of reality benefit them as part of like a thinking exercise for you, instead of just being living in the land of self-doubt, to really look at an emotionally immature parent's motives? A lot of inner work and outside help needs to happen here, because we all need sane people in our lives, especially when we were kids, and we may have to find those people in the present to bounce things off of about what is real and what isn't. Like this video might be validating for you, stating that missing need of maybe bouncing something off somebody or hearing something in that way. So, okay, let's maybe briefly check in. What I want viewers to walk away with from this video is hopefully some validation, but also some connecting your past to your present. What jumps out at you so far in this video? It's important to not just know that the family was not a safe place for little kids, but for example, can you think about and maybe comment about what does mutually satisfying mean to you? Do you believe that that exists? What perception issues might you still struggle with around, like, say, people's intentions or your own intentions? Like if you're being too judgmental or not judgmental enough. It's good to see others experiencing what you might be experiencing, so feel free to leave a comment. Or if that's too much for you, just simply put up a high five emoji to say, yes, this resonates with me, and this is incredibly tricky stuff that we're all experiencing. So what is the alternative to this one about reality? The healthy alternative is when a parent chooses the truth over their self-preservation. That's kind of what I mean about the motives of an emotionally immature parent. Like probably was around a lot of self-preservation, saving face. Moving on to number 4, which is the someone will do it dynamic. This is a family where responsibility is kind of a game of hot potato. Whether it's a mess in the kitchen, a bill that needs to be paid, or an emotional crisis, or parenting one of the children, everyone waits for someone else to break first, and then the person who breaks first is going to handle it. Usually that someone who ends up doing it is maybe the parentified child in the family, or the super codependent parent. Other examples of parents offshoring parenting to things like teachers, and other examples, maybe a parent exhibited weaponized incompetence, like as a power struggle between the parents or with the siblings, or letting a child fall through the cracks by one parent to prove a point to the other, which is real dark when you think about it. The healthy alternative to this one would be clear communication, general consideration of others, and top-down behavior modeling. Like imagine if you had a sibling that could kind of get away with everything, but imagine if you had a parent that worked with that sibling who weaponized that they wouldn't take out the trash because they were too sad that day and they could get away with that. That kind of stuff, how it impacts us. You might have become an adult who can't relax until every task is done. You might likely carry a heavy, obsessive burden of responsibility in your workplace or your own partnerships or marriage because your nervous system is wired to believe that if you don't do it, the whole system might collapse. It's that weaponized letting something fail that has made us go into survival mode and kind of hypervigilant. Here's what to do about it. It's called the drop the ball exercise. Practicing letting a non-critical task go undone and sit with the anxiety that follows. And maybe observe that the world doesn't end when you stop maybe over-functioning. The other thing you do is an inner child dialogue. Ask your inner child, why do you feel like it's your job to do everything or save everyone? In a healthy family, to ask your inner child, whose job was that supposed to be? And acknowledge that you were a child, you were forced to be maybe the fixer. But as an adult, you can kind of resign from that role now. It's going to be uncomfortable until it becomes comfortable to do that. And a hard side note to this is the final piece in this is potentially growing up and ending up the adult child of, say, a hoarder, meaning that this power struggle is not always a conscious, deliberate, weaponized one, but maybe one of parental mental illness where family has to pick up many pieces from that self-consumed parent who doesn't have any insight. The healthy alternative would be addressing issues mutually, like between parents, or individually, that the parent gets their own help, that causes the power struggle and the waiting game. That's its own video topic in of itself, but in short, did one parent need to individually address their mental health or their addiction issues, and then maybe later go to couples therapy about delegating healthy parenting, that kind of stuff. Moving on to number 5 is feelings are not important, but they also run everything. The family atmosphere is 100% dictated by unstated, unresolved emotions, yet there is a complete lack of emotional courage or language to discuss those emotions. 5 people eggshell one parent due to extreme fear and anxiety, but just call it maybe that's just Wednesday for us. Slam doors are never talked about. A parent, say excessive shopping or their excessive drinking is maybe due to their trauma or anxiety that is never addressed or named or talked about. That sibling who is getting into, say, recreational drugs or acting out or going through personality changes is reacting to probably untalked about family trauma or the trauma that that child is going through. But it's just like that kid is bad. Another example is, say, a parent having an affair because that's driven by sadness that they're not connected to about having poor intimacy in their marriage or they're acting out or their own trauma. Again, the main piece is that no one ever addresses it, related to the elephant. Here is how it might impact us. You might become like a super sensitive radar system for other people's moods, or you might struggle with things like people pleasing because you're constantly trying to manage the invisible tension in the room before it explodes, because these people don't know about their feelings and they can't manage their own feelings. And that for you can lead to some chronic hypervigilance about what's going on with people mood-wise. You may have lived a big chunk of your life as only able to say things like, it's fine. Whenever someone called to light a feeling that you might be having or an emotional experience around you. And we say it's fine is really code for I don't know what the emotion is and I don't know what's happening, or I don't know how to be real about it. So here's what to do about it. Label your feelings and label the climate. Practice identifying the atmosphere around you out loud and maybe say to yourself, the air feels really heavy right now. I'm sensing tension. I feel anxious. This validates your perception of reality, like in number 2 with the elephants. The second thing to do is to release the burden. Remind yourself, if they haven't used their words to tell me what's wrong, it's not my job to solve their mood. With this one, the greatest nugget I've heard from my mentor, Amanda Curtin, and this is all in context of actually infants and toddlers, is she said, they're just feeling their feelings. Beautiful, simple, disarming. A crying baby is just feeling their feelings. A child who is afraid of an unhinged parent is doing the same. They're just feeling their feelings. But we can be so reactive to people's feelings about this, especially growing up in a family that was totally detached from feelings. What's the alternative to this one? Is that feelings are not a threat. Feelings might actually make you become whole, or help you become whole, or help you become more authentic, or help you be you. Moving on to number 6, what I call the perfect pets. This is an analogy. This is a specific dynamic where a family has pets that they love, or maybe not, but the animals are chronically neglected. There are no walks, there are dirty litter boxes, there are untreated illnesses. This is a mirror for a neglected child's experience. But this involves the parental mindset that fuels that neglect. Like, what is it about parents who kind of treat their kids like pets? What is going on there? That children don't need much, just like that parent who is raising you maybe didn't need much, and so on, from a generational trauma lens. Or a parent might believe that connecting is like watering a succulent plant, like a cactus, meaning that the parent thinks that connection will happen whenever I get to it, but not on a daily basis, not to the level that children need, which is daily. So a parent is extremely removed from their task as a parent, and if not enraged when they're called out on that for being neglectful, often maybe acting victimized by their choice in being a parent. Here is how this might impact us. It teaches you that love is kind of just a word that doesn't involve action or protection or consistent care. And as an adult, you might accept low effort relationships because you were taught that being kept, like being fed and being housed, is the same for being loved and cared for, which is, yes, that's technically yes, but there's so much more to it in terms of daily emotional connection and attachment. And in a more extreme way, neglected children are usually going to struggle with a sense of self as well as an existential grounding in reality. Like before therapy, I didn't really feel that I fully existed, which is a thing for childhood trauma. It's a fixable thing, but it's a thing. Here is what to do. A, reclaim reality. Acknowledge that the way that the family treated the children as pets was a direct reflection on their emotional bandwidth. And it wasn't really about you. And I'm not sort of giving them a pass on that. I'm just sort of stating that you weren't safe and you were not in the right home growing up. And it wasn't just busyness. It was a systemic lack of care for small children. And number 2 is, if it's available to you, and I know this suggestion might be frustrating for therapy not being affordable or working out or whatever, but in reality is lack of connection was the trauma. And I really believe in my heart that connection is going to also be the healing, but it's also going to be really, really hard to tolerate that. So what I'm saying is there's a link in the description of this video of RRP Therapist. RRP is the Relationship Recovery Process, which is a model of childhood trauma therapy that I practice, developed by Amanda Curtin. And we've trained therapists in that model. Feel free to check them out in the description of this video. If that's too much all at once to see somebody or join a group, consider joining my monthly healing community, where it's a little bit of community in an online forum and a lot of childhood trauma resources. If you can find a good therapist, go for that first and see how it goes. So what's the alternative to this one? It's simple don't have children just to have them. I'm not telling you that. I'm just sort of as a statement about our own family systems. I'll say it again. Don't have children just to have them. So much damage comes from that. Number 7 is celebrating success is morally wrong, or misery loves company. This one is weird, and this one is deep. It's a lot like in dysfunctional families. Pride is treated like a sin. If you come home with a win at school, the response is cutting sarcasm, or your win or your drawing is ignored, or there's always someone better that can do the thing, so don't get a big head about things. But that can never be you. You can never be number one in their eyes. Being small and being humble is the only safe way to be in the world, or the only right way to really exist. Some roots to this in toxic families tend to be rooted in shame. That scholarships don't become major victories. They're proof that you're selfish somehow. Like, oh, how'd you get the scholarship? Look how fancy you are. So toxic families operate in kind of a collective misery. Why do you get to succeed in life? There's a one up, one down weird thing going on there. And the deep cut on this is some parents with childhood trauma have this from their narcissistic parents, where there was hypervigilance about self-positivity because it's a trigger to them. Like, you're excited about your Thanksgiving turkey hand drawing in the 2nd grade, and your parent is triggered to you being grandiose about it. So it's kind of like that narcissistic flea kind of concept. It just tells us that our parents didn't do their work if they're being this like cold and sarcastic and kind of miserable. Here's how it impacts us. The main thing is imposter syndrome. You might feel some self-hate about thinking you're good at something when you're actually just good at something, or you're doing something good and doing good things. You might subconsciously sabotage your wins, or feel a shame spiral or a shame chill when people praise you because your family coded success as like a betrayal of the larger group somehow. Here's what to do about it, is identify the kind of mandate that was given. Recognize that your parents wanted you small because it made it easier for them to manage or control you, or to manage their own shame somehow. Your smallness was kind of like their comfort, which is really dark when you think about it. The second thing to do is practice taking up space. Find a safe person or a support group and practice saying, I did a good job on this, and I'm proud of myself. As much as that might make you want to throw up in your shoes, that's a bit of the practice. Practice holding that feeling of pride without immediately dismissing it or shaming it. What healing looks like around this one is when you get a compliment and you don't shoo it away. That's probably like it's going to be telling you if you do that about this one. The third thing to do with this one is a lot of my videos I talk about holding abusive parents accountable. Here is a great example, and I don't mean to do that face-to-face in person with them. I mean to do that in the therapy room. But here is a great example of holding parents accountable for not doing their own work around shame and misery. If that work wasn't available to them, which I get it, did they even try to protect you from their own misery? It's usually about spilling shame and misery onto their children. What's the alternative to this one? Celebrate children. It really helps them have a sense of self. It's how we become through that love and being seen. It doesn't mean that we're grandiose. And now moving on to number 8 is some genders are just better. This is a hard-coded hierarchy where, for example, maybe the sons are golden boys who can do no wrong, while the daughters are expected to be domestic servants, or they aren't trustworthy, like women aren't trustworthy somehow, or vice versa, just flip those genders. Value is assigned based on gender rather than character. And kind of when you're born, your fate is sealed in some of these families. Here is how it impacts us. You might have a warped view of your own inherent value in context of your gender. You might find yourself playing out these roles in adulthood, either overly functioning to prove your worth about your gender, or shrinking because you believe that you're less than by design. In the toxic family, gender is often a weaponized idea. And what I mean by that, this is inclusive to all, regardless about what gender that you were born with and what you identify with now. There's going to be issues wrapped up in this if you grew up in an unsafe family. Here is what to do with it. Do an audit. Look back at 3 generations of your family. Who held the power in those 3 generations? Who did things like the invisible labor? Recognizing the gender patterns help depersonalize it. How are boys treated? How are girls treated? How is being neither of those things, if you identify differently, looked at? You might have 3 generations of men being called useless by women. You might have 3 generations, and this is dark, you might have 3 generations of women being seen as untrustworthy whores by men and by other women, like an internal misogyny thing there. I know that that sounded really, really dark, but I've had that come up so many times when I was practicing of a female client coming in and just like really talking about how they were treated as just like this untrustworthy being. So in short, we all have to reclaim and redefine what our gender is and around these toxic narratives that we grew up with. A genogram is going to be very, very helpful in doing that kind of audit. Another piece is to decouple the identity from the role. Work on the core belief that your worth isn't tied to your gender, and also denounce those toxic narratives about gender in general. The gender one is really about how abusive family will dehumanize members based upon their gender, and it becomes weaponized. What's the alternative? For parents to be is kind of check your own generational trauma and check your own personal expectations. Lastly, moving on to number 9, and probably the most impactful one I think of in the abusive family system, is be the better person since they can't or won't. In the abusive family system, we are usually told to be the better person with someone who refuses to be the better person. This is when you are told to just apologize and move on to an abusive relative because that's just how they are. The victim is forced to be the mature adult, while the actual perpetrating adult is allowed to be acted like a toddler or a child. How this impacts us. This is really a massive betrayal of your reality, relevant to the one earlier. It teaches you to enable toxicity and to abandon your own self and boundaries just to keep the peace. As an adult, you may stay in toxic situations far too long because you're being the better person way too much, if that makes sense. Put a comment if you've been the better person way too much in your relationships. Another additional issue is I've been told that I have an overdeveloped sense of fairness in my life. Relevant to this one, how I grew up, meaning I used to get extremely triggered around issues around unfairness when other people weren't held to the same standards. And I was able to trace it to this issue and move on from it. We don't really believe in justice. And we can kind of take on a nihilistic view about fairness, where the world is extremely unjust. And yes, that's true, but there is a deep core within us that this thing still lives on in us, this kind of self-betrayal, or we were encouraged to self-betrayal. What to do about it? Redefine integrity and reclaim your dignity. Redefine being the better person as the person who has the integrity to stand up for the truth, not the person who self-betrays because your Aunt Trudy suggested to skip what the massively abusive thing your mother did to you. Dignity is about making space for yourself and not self-betraying. The second thing to do is stop the enabling or the enabling vibes. You don't have to be mean, but you can set a truth boundary. For example, this is something you might say to Aunt Trudy. I'm not going to apologize for something I didn't do just to make the holiday easier for somebody else. I'm not being petty or scorekeeping, but perhaps my father is by not addressing his behavior. That's what that would kind of look like. This one is really rooted in putting the burden on someone who is more capable of doing the apologizing and the right thing and enabling the perpetrator, who is usually doubling down and refusing to be the better person, if that makes sense. This one is also rooted in shaming the more capable one, which would be you, because your mother or your sibling or your father is extremely difficult and you're just easier. What's the alternative to this one? You will find out who you are by telling the truth about the perpetrator. That's all that sense of self stuff that I kind of talk about, where you're picking yourself in the actual reality versus self-betrayal. And by doing that, you're gonna find out who you are. So here are some final thoughts on all this stuff. So why look at our families? If there are issues like having an emotionally immature parent, or extreme marital conflict, or a parent acting out or being neglectful, all of those are going to impact a child's development. We can get stuck in some of these issues that we covered, such as feeling compelled to do everything, or not believing in healthy partnerships. It's important to remind yourself that of course you struggle with these things if you resonate with all this, given how you were raised. So the issues that might feel heavy, or might feel validating, we can feel big things, including grief, that our family was an ordeal and not a place to feel safe or thrive in. You might have known about these things, but not really yet see them as that damaging or impactful as they are, or even that we're kind of creating a roadmap about how to get out of these things. These 9 specific family issues are coming from multiple issues about abusive family systems that cause childhood trauma. They are not examples of healthy family systems, and the issues impact each other and overlap over time. Like not mutually satisfying, part of that can be parents who are neglectful for their own children and have a power struggle between them about not doing something, such as parenting, until the other person caves, if that makes sense. I am in no way saying that every family is highly toxic or highly abusive. These videos are really for people who grew up in situations that they were unsafe and it was dysfunctional and it was toxic. I'm not saying that these are all universal issues that happen in every family, because there are plenty of families who are healthy and who not do these behaviors. But if you're new to these behaviors and these issues, go back or just pick any one of the 9 that we talked about today and ask how that might impact any child in a family. And here are some resources. Go check out 11 oddly specific childhood trauma issues for more insight about this stuff. This video that you're watching is the accompanying video to that video. And I mentioned in a family audit, check out a course that I offer on the genogram, which is your family tree of dysfunction, 3 generations, that teaches you how to put it together from the 3-generational map and looking at generational trauma from a deeper lens. The course can be bought on its own or it can be included in my monthly healing membership, offered at different pricing tiers, including live events, weekly journal prompts, and other resources to make the process go easier. So you can also check out that list of trained childhood trauma therapists. I would start there. I really would advocate for you to find a therapist if that's available to you, trained in the relationship recovery process, again, developed by my mentor, Amanda Curtin, LICSW. So what stood out for you in the video? I would love to hear about it in a comment, even if it's something that you've already kind of known about and you're already working on. And thank you for staying with me so far. And as always, may you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. And may you be joyous. And I will see you next time. Thanks for hanging out with me.